one of the greatest challenges to me personally and to my completing the seminary educational program was internship, because there I met Markland Staples, and you can understand how that might challenge one's sanity, send you in for counseling for post-traumatic stress, create your own personality disorders. But actually, Russ Genzel, having been my parish pastor growing up, when he moved to Allentown and heard that I was in seminary, actually I did Greek at Gettysburg, and he called me at the end and said, I would like you to consider coming to Allentown as my intern when you're ready. He too, for me, was one of those giants of ministry with an incredible intellect, an amazing drive. I don't know when he ever slept. Best homiletician I think I've ever met. Community organizer. Never asked of his other pastors anything he wasn't prepared to do or hadn't done, including visiting. Even as a senior of 3, he was always out visiting people. So I went with some trepidation, but also with some hopes of learning much more from him at a very different level. I wasn't there very long when I certainly had a number of opportunities. I was in the chaplain candidate program, CCPO program, while at seminary. So a theological schools program, they also called it, which meant that I was a naval officer in the reserves, but not yet, since not ordained, qualified to do a number of things. However, I would go from Allentown down to the naval base at Philadelphia on Tuesdays to join the chaplain company to learn from some of the more seasoned chaplains, but also asked to have an assignment down there so I could begin to relate to a particular organization. And I selected the Marine Detachment, who ran what they called the Red Line Brig down there. But they were also the security people and so on. I started out as Ensign Jensen, and Agnes Borneman still refers to me as Ensign Jensen. So that's another handicap I've had to overcome. But as Ensign Jensen, I was in the district chaplain's office one day when a phone call came in, and apparently a sailor who was distraught for unknown reasons had removed a sidearm from a security guard at Philadelphia Airport when they were doing construction down there, and had it holed up in a construction trailer and was threatening to end his life. And so they asked for a chaplain to come down, and the senior chaplain felt that it wasn't their, we say in Hawaii, kuleana, area of responsibility. And then the assistant also wasn't quite sure, and I simply said, I'm driving, so whoever's going, get in the car and let's go. So there's the young whippersnapper again. But as we got to the airport, the policeman said, so which one of you is Lutheran? And the assistant chaplain said, he's it. So I think after a whole week, having been commissioned, I was now confronted with this. So I was escorted over to the trailer and talked to him a little bit to introduce myself through the open door. And then he had me come in. So he had the weapon at my forehead the whole time. And as we talked, I determined that he was intent on committing suicide. He wanted out of the Navy, and if they wouldn't do that, that was how he was going to take care of it. So he asked me to give him absolution and communion, and I used that as an excuse to say I had to leave for a few minutes to get the supplies. So as I left, I told the police commissioner and the deputy that he clearly was going to do that, and suggested that as I got him to kneel and bow, that they wrestle the gun from him. So as they went back in there, they quickly drafted up a fake release from the military and told him that he needed to sign that for that to be valid. So as he changed hands with the weapon and pen, they grabbed him, and the deputy put his hand in between the trigger or the hammer and the weapon, and got it away from him. So that was one of my first experiences with the Navy. But so I would travel then from Allentown down to Philly every week and back, but also was asked to cover the Marine Reserve Detachment at Freemansburg, Pennsylvania. During that time, Mark and Lynn were the leaders, the adult advisors for the youth group. And there was a flood then in Wilkes-Barre, as I recall, fall maybe of 71.
Actually, June of 72.
June of 72. Yeah. So flood in Wilkes-Barre, June of 72. And we gathered a number of the youth and other volunteers and went down. Mark ran a story with pictures that we took of our group down there. Rather sobering experience with putrid, thick, viscous mud everywhere, and having to throw out people's treasures, and seeing how high the water had gone with watermarks on the walls and so on. But for me, it was another example of how quickly people at the church rose to an occasion and reached out to others. It was also my first opportunity to see a dirigible up close. Mark was asked to do a story, as I recall, on his birthday, and got to ride up there. So Lynn and I kept our wits about us and stayed on the ground where we belonged. With 2 weeks before graduation and learning that I had to have a 3-year parish experience prior to going on active duty, the Synod of Upstate New York, President Ed Perry, offered Kensington Evangelical Lutheran Church in Buffalo as a call. But unbeknownst to anyone else, his expectation was that I would go in and close it. When I got there and met the people and saw the neighborhood and the needs, it was clear to me, however, that there was a need for ministry, and there were people capable of making that happen. And so we turned it around, and it became actually a very vibrant ministry, to the point that the, as I recall, the city and county, whatever the common council was, issued a proclamation naming our church as the greatest community asset in all of Erie County. Now, being a solo pastor in a first church and being asked the day I arrived if they had taught me at seminary how to work on boilers, how good I was at shoveling snow, And even the ability to read a budget and advocate, that certainly wasn't there. But with all of the other challenges at seminary, I was able to perhaps stand up for myself, but ask questions like, do you have to be ordained to do that? So in gathering community support and in motivating the people, I think we did rather well. But then from there, getting a commission to go on active duty, my first assignment was on a cruiser out of San Diego, and I was the only chaplain there. And I was greeted by a commanding officer who made it very clear that he had no use for chaplains and would much rather have another officer. So flashback to Bill Lazarus, and an opportunity for me to explain the value of the chaplain for him and for his crew. But also quickly learning that I was a department head and that I was expected to be the expert in my field, just as the chief engineer, the supply officer, the gunnery officer, anyone else was. So again, the rigorous exercises at seminary, I think, may be better prepared for that. And all of the off-campus things that we did and were expected to do prepared me, I think, to get throughout the ship and learn to talk with people about their needs and quickly develop a connection. So I found throughout my career that people would say something like, "Oh, you're Lutheran. That explains it." And I would think, uh-oh. And what they would mean is, you're well trained and you're well grounded. And even today, in this community in Hawaii, people would say, "What's with the Lutherans? How come everything that seems to happen for veterans from churches is from the Lutherans? And they're not there to put a notch in their Bible, but rather to provide for a need." So I've been very thankful over the years.